First of all, you probably shouldn't listen to a guy wearing a hoodie. These are half-baked thoughts, but, with the whole COVID thing going on for a long time, I'm a little frustrated because whenever I speak with people on a one-to-one basis, they think it's a little bit overblown. I think what's happening in the States, and then I'm going to talk about the Canadian numbers, but I think they're trying to make the lockdown, as long as possible so that the economy is bad so they can get Trump out of office. I think that's one of their strategies. Censorship is another strategy that's going on right now. It's not that COVID is propaganda, but the way it's being spun in the media, I believe, is propagandistic. And I want to talk about some of the numbers. So the first thing that I want to discuss is that the average death of someone that dies with COVID is actually usually higher than the average lifespan of human beings in their respective countries, period. Why is this a big deal? Because a lot of people will then say, well, you don't care about old people? And that's not the problem. The problem is that locking down an entire society will have a lot of unintended consequences. If the average death is 80, let's look over here. Here in Alberta, for example, average age of infection in Alberta is 39. Now, infection, I'm sorry, I don't care too much about the average age of it, because at the end of the day, it's how many people are going to die, how old are they, what are their underlying conditions, and if there's a group of people that's at a higher risk, why do we have to punish the whole society? It's not that we don't want to help and save those people, but I believe there's more creative solutions we could do to prevent, of course, as many deaths as possible without actually inadvertently causing other deaths to happen. And that's what I want to talk about next. So, average age of death from COVID is 83 years old. You could see that on the screen. Here's what the media doesn't really talk about on an active basis, at least as much as they talk about, look at all that, we're having so many infections. I mean, of course, they're doing a lot more tests in the States, for example, so there's going to be more infections. But at the end of the day, it's how many people are going to die. Now, the other thing to consider, I'm just going to focus on the suicides for a moment. Depending which studies you listen to, for every percentage of unemployment, suicide raises by, I've seen numbers as low as 1% to as high as this one I'm going to talk to you about is either 2.4 or 2.8. There we go. According to Kneebone, I don't know what Kneebone is, but this is the star.com, as you can see. Every 1% in the unemployment rate in Alberta correlates with a 2.8% increase in suicides. Now, of course, that's in Alberta. In different parts of the country and in different countries, it's going to be different. But even if it's only 1% increase in suicides for every 1% in unemployment, I mean, if we're talking about 20-30% in unemployment, those are big numbers. And Canada didn't get to that bad. Here's another stat. 1 in 5 suicides a year worldwide is attributed to unemployment. So you could look at, I'm going to put all these links, of course, in the description. You can, if you want, you can read them, break them apart, and let me know if you think my thinking is wrong, of course. Here's the average life expectancy in Canada. It's 82.25 years old. And of course, if we go back over here, average COVID death, 83. So pretty much identical, all right? But how many more suicides are we going to have? How many more cases of child abuse? How many more drug and alcohol dependency problems are we going to have? There's a lot of things that I understand people mean well, but sometimes there's unintended consequences. The number of Canadian suicides. So that, like, a year, that's 4,100. So I don't want to do math in front of you because I'm not really good at it. But imagine if unemployment was to go down to 20 to 30%. So we'd see a 20-30% increase off of, now, of course, a couple thousand more suicides. On one hand, that's not too many deaths, right? If you're looking at a country that's like 38 million people and a couple more thousand people die, I could see why this argument goes both ways, right? Like, you say if we don't do lockdown, maybe there's 5,000 more old people that die, for example. But if we do lockdown, we're going to see, let's say, look, you can play around with the numbers, but sometimes doing less is doing more. You know what I mean? Because if we see this increase of suicides, it's going to be crazy. Unemployment rate in Canada, 2019, 5.6%. In 2020, so far in May, the highest we've seen was 13.7. So 13.7, I mean, it's not super bad, but consider that that's more than doubled. And again, 1 in 5 suicides are attributable to unemployment. So COVID, I think, is one of these things that's being used by the media to create some sort of big narrative to make Trump look bad. And Trump is very good at making himself look bad. He doesn't need the media for that. That's one thing that's going on. The other thing is if you've been following the continued censorship in media, it's ridiculous. We all know that the liberal tech companies, Twitter, Facebook owns Instagram, Google, it's extremely left-leaning. The media is extremely left-leaning. 96% of the people that contributed money from the media to a presidential campaign, 96% of that went to Clinton. Like, how do we get honest media if most of the media is supporting one side? With the exception of Fox. Fox leans right, but everything else that's mainstream leans left. And then all these tech companies. So Project Veritas recently uncovered, and I'll have the link here as well, how the moderators at Facebook, anything Trump related, they pretty much delete. Someone can have wear a MAGA hat, delete. Cited for, I don't know, terrorism or whatever. It's an interesting video. James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, Facebook. If you YouTube that, you should hopefully still be able to find it. They've done a lot of undercover work like this. So it's very concerning. Like, if you actually, everyone was saying, oh, Trump was colluding with Russia. Like, this is actual collusion. If you investigate all these social media companies and all the tech platforms and then the Democrats, there's a huge... I think it's undeniable. But who knows? Maybe I'm just really, really brainwashed. Look, up until Trump's election, I'll be honest with you, I was not political. I had a poster on my wall with Bush. It said it was him, like a Jedi with the lightsaber. And it said, "Start wars," right? Bush starts wars. I didn't know. I was so happy. I don't know if happy is the right word. I was glad when Obama got elected. I'm like, yes, about time. A black guy gets elected in, it's real progress. It's real hope. I didn't know anything Obama. I really liked his ability to speak. Whatever he said, it sounded good. Of course, I didn't go anywhere beyond that. And then over the last couple of years, I started really, I could say paying attention, but I don't know if that's correct. Because before, I used to listen to a lot of the left-leaning stuff, like the Young Turks was a big thing that I used to listen to. Bill Maher. I still listen to Bill Maher because you want to see what someone is saying that's on one side of the extreme, let's say. And on some things, I agree with Bill Maher, and some things I think that's like that with most people. But there's a couple of people that have had that have had an influence on the way that I think. But of course, some people I feel bad for black conservatives because they have legitimate arguments, and I think that a lot of them are good, well thought out arguments, but people just call them coons and Uncle Toms and all these different names, because what I find is when people can't go after the argument is they go after the character. For example, with the COVID thing, like I've been called selfish a lot. By people, and they're trying to make me feel bad. Like, it's not that, and they're putting words in my mouth. I do not want old people to die, obviously, but we also, and they're like, oh, well, now that you say but, it means that you do. No, we have to be pragmatic. We have to be realistic. If I had the choice, let's say the numbers being equal, you act and you save 5,000 old people. You know what? Let's give it a bigger number. 10,000 old people. Great. But let's say because of this action, we killed 10,000 not old people. And one of the arguments that I heard over this course of the last few months that I really like is, well, it's not just about the number of people that die, but you also have to take into account number of years left, right? If 10,000 old people die, and most of them would probably die in the next couple of years of a flu or of something. And that's terrible, but that's life. Part of life is death. We know that. Let's be mature about it. But if 10,000 people die and the average age of those 10,000 are, let's say, 45 years old, for example, the two biggest suicide gaps or age brackets are between 45 and 64 years old. So if you have 10,000 people that have 40 years left to live, let's do some quick math. So if we take 10,000 people that died, now, I know these are arbitrary numbers. They don't actually... I get it, because we don't know how many more people are going to die from suicide. You know what? Just to humor you, let's do something else. Let's say we save 10,000 old people from COVID, but if we didn't log it down, 10,000 old people die, but 5,000 people died from suicides. So what's the number? 5,000 times 5,000 people times, let's say each of them died at 45, so let's say they live until they're 80, so let's say 35 years, right? 5,000 times 35. So in this scenario, we lose 175,000 years. Let's say from the 10,000 old people that die, 10,000, and let's say each of them has 5 years left to live. 10,000 times 5. That's 50,000 years lost. Now, what number is bigger? 50,000? Or, what was the other math? 5,000 times 35. Or 175,000. So that's something to consider. I know you might not want to hear it. I know this may be controversial. But there is something there. You got to admit that. And that's just suicides. There's other things to consider. Okay, now I'm going to take this 17-minute video and try to make it into something that's easily digestible.